Hi, everyone. Welcome to Talk Back. Today is Tuesday, March 9th, 2021. Maybe we're starting to begin the dawn of a new day in our country. The vaccines are working. We have new political leadership. Laws are being passed to help people out of the suffering we've had the last year. But we still have to remember the suffering. In Eastern Connecticut, we're doing a program on seeking refuge, Shanghai on Beyond. The people who sought refuge from the Holocaust and couldn't get it when the doors to America and many countries were closed in the late 1930s and 40s. They sought refuge in unexpected places, including Shanghai, which is the subject of our program in a few weeks. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking to two people who are remembering another kind of refuge, a refuge of courageous people who took their own lives in their hands to protect Jewish children during World War II years. I'm so pleased to introduce Ginger Lane. Hi, Ginger. It's so good to see you.
Hi,
You're
hi,
coming.
Sheila. Thank you.
You're coming to us from Chicago. This is a bi-coastal, intercoastal show today, so terrific. And your daughter, Beth Lane, a filmmaker from California. Hi, Beth. How are
Good
you?
morning. Thanks for having us on, Sheila.
Hi. So the theme is seeking refuge and the courage that people have to protect people who were about to go to the gas chambers in Germany, in Eastern Europe. So, would you hide me? That's the name I see all the time when I see everything about you, Beth and Ginger, that we're reading about. I've been on Zooms where you're talking about this. It's going to be a documentary about Ginger's experiences during the Holocaust years and how she sought refuge. So let me start with Ginger. It's so good to see you. And
Thank
Ginger,
you. Well, I'm delighted
Ginger,
to be here.
I'm going to start this way. You were a little girl when you finally made it to the USA in what year was it? 45?
1946.
46. Okay, close.
May
How,
May 20th,
and
1946.
how old were you at that time, Ginger?
I was 6.5. And actually, Sheila, the boat that we came over on was the first authorized boat that President Truman had signed back in December of 1945 to allow us to immigrate to the United States. And so we were on the first boatload of people who came over after the war.
Well, that's fabulous. So now here you are, a 6.5-year-old. Do you have memories? How did it feel? What did you see? Again, what was going through your mind and your heart at that time?
Well, I'm the youngest of 7 children, and we all came together. So my memories certainly are not as good as my siblings' memories, but I do have some memories. One of which was that we were on this, I think every day I got seasick. It was a 9-day voyage coming from Bremerhaven, Germany, to New York. And the first image, I have 2 images. One was that we were all sleeping in the same cabin together, all 7 of us. And one of my sisters worked in the kitchen, in the galley, and would come back to our cabin loaded down with oranges. So we ate oranges every day, which was phenomenal. The other thing I remember about that boat trip was that I was busy throwing up all the time. But the greatest image was we actually arrived in New York Harbor in the evening, and we slept aboard the ship. And the next morning, the purser came and said, "Everybody up on deck." And we all ran up to the top deck. And the first image that we saw was the Statue of Liberty, which was incredibly inviting and welcoming to us. And I thought, because we all ran over to the side of the ship to see the statue, I thought the ship was going to capsize because we all were leaning over the side. But it was an incredible, welcoming image to see that we were now in a country that was going to accept us and take us in and allow us to live a decent life.
Well, that's a wonderful, wonderful capturing of your experiences there. I can picture it, and it's terrific. And you don't have photographs probably, but look what the mind's eye can recapture. I think it's wonderful. The picture you painted for us was great. So we're going to go backwards, but let's go forwards a little bit, because you built a wonderful life in America, right?
Yes, I did. Because I was the youngest of 7. We were all, we came to Chicago through the auspices of the Jewish Children's Bureau. And we had spent the war years always together, all 7 of us. And when we arrived in Chicago after a month of quarantine in New York, we actually were taken to 7 different foster homes, which is understandable. No one family wanted to, house 7 children. But we were separated. I was eventually adopted by a wonderful couple, and really grew up having a very normal childhood and teenage years, with a lot of opportunities in Chicago, which eventually led to my moving into the field of dance. And that's what my life has been about. Dance has been a huge part of my life, besides, of course, having gotten married and having 3 fantastic children, and now 7 grandchildren.
Oh, that's wonderful. So you have Beth is your daughter, and you have a son, Rusty, is that right?
Yes, my son Rusty and my other daughter Jennifer. And they all have children, which have just enriched my life immeasurably.
Great. And so there was some sadness here in America that has disabled you in a way, but not disabled your wonderful mind and your memories and your heart. What happened to you in a skiing accident? Tell us about it.
Yeah, in 1984, I was downhill skiing and I hit a tree. So I became a quadriplegic, using a manual chair for many years, and now I use a power chair. But what that actually enabled me to do was to kind of refocus my life. I went into counseling, where I worked with people with disabilities, became a disability rights advocate and activist, where I counseled many newly injured people, and then got back into dance after a number of years, which I never thought would happen, and worked for an independent living center and started an arts and culture program for people with disabilities that has extended until today, where we have physically integrated dance, inclusive dance that includes people with and without disabilities. So it's a whole new chapter of my life.
That's wonderful. So we are going to talk later about what happened to your siblings, how you've been separated, reunited. But now we want to turn to the memories and keeping alive what happened to you in Germany with your siblings during the darkest periods in our history. And so now I'm going to turn to your daughter, Beth. And Beth is a filmmaker who's going to be making a documentary. And Beth, I want to start by talking to you about a short film that I saw on your website, where you asked your family members how many people were in your immediate family. You came up with the number 72. And in the end, you said these 72 people, all our siblings, children, grandchildren, would not have existed were it not for 2 people in Germany during World War II and the Holocaust. Start telling me about that film that you made and how you came to realize I have to make this film about my mother's past.
Sure. It is It is obviously a deeply personal film, a deeply personal story. We're in post-production right now, so we're not finished with the film. And how do I describe the feeling of coming to that decision that I had to make it? I've always known my mom's story. I learned that she was adopted when I was 6 years old. And I don't know when I learned about the Holocaust exactly, but I learned that she was adopted at that age. There are points along the way where I just felt like I wanted to learn more about her history, more about her family. And I wasn't, it wasn't a secret, but there just were no answers. Mom didn't have any memories. She wasn't in touch with her biological family. And so it was just kind of tucked away in a different closet or country or whatever. But it was something that always stirred my imagination. And I think as an actor, because my whole life I've been an actor, the goal of an actor is to climb inside of someone else's shoes and see their point of view and to have extraordinary empathy and compassion with other people's circumstances. So it's something that I toyed with as a writer, as an actor, and nothing ever really felt quite appropriate in terms of my sharing with other people in terms of a theatrical performance or so forth. And I also felt that it wasn't my story to tell. It was my mother's. And, she's a dancer and she is a performer in her own right. So I never felt that it was really appropriate for me to say, okay, this is the story I'm going to use and I'm going to move forward. However, in 2017, Mom wanted to go back to Germany for the first time. And we went, my sister and my father and I joined her. And we went to the town of Voreen where Mom was hidden by two Christian farmers. And the town historians were our hosts that day, and they had a surprise for us. They invited the grandson of the farmers to come and meet us.
Wow.
And this was an extraordinary watershed moment where I realized that this was a completely different point of view. This was the Schmidt point of view as opposed to the Lane point of view. And in that moment, that's when I realized that I had to tell a story. No one else was going to do it. Mom had her chance and she did choreograph some pieces and had other people choreograph pieces about her memories. But it was in that moment that I decided I must tell this story. It is extraordinary. And in addition to Paula and Arthur Schmidt and their names, thank goodness, thanks to my mom and my uncle Alphonse and these town historians, their names are engraved on the granite walls in the Gardens of the Righteous at Yad Vashem.
Right.
But there were also so many other people along the way that helped them survive the war years and liberation and ultimately emigrate to America. And it's all of those names and locations and things that have fascinated me since 2017. And that is what the film really is, trying to look for clues and trying to find all of the circumstances and people and places along the way that helped them survive.
So let me go back to Ginger now, because now that Beth has explained how her feelings led her to start working on the documentary, Ginger, I want to know from you, as Beth explained, you grew up away from your siblings, probably not in a Jewish environment. When did you have stirrings thinking about, wait a minute, I need to remember my family, I need to think about it, and give me your journey leading up to deciding, yes, I'm going to Germany. Tell me about that journey.
Well, as I mentioned, Sheila, in 1946, after we arrived, we all went into separate foster homes. I was adopted, and because I was having issues with my birth family that I got to see, and now my new adoptive family, I was having a lot of problems. And the Jewish Children's Bureau felt it was in my best interest if I no longer had contact with my birth family, because they kept saying, "Don't forget Mama, don't forget Papa." My mother had been murdered in Auschwitz in 1943, and so I had lots of torn feelings, and lost touch with my family of birth for 40 years. But I always knew they existed. We all grew up in the Chicago area. And finally, so I had feelings of it would be disloyal to my adopted family if I had contact with my family of birth. Anyway, I became disabled in 1984. And in 1986, I finally sort of got the courage to contact my birth family. And we had a fantastic reunion and have had contact ever since. But it wasn't until after my brother Alphonse died in 2016 that I felt I really needed to go back to Germany, a place I'd never wanted to go back to, and sort of not confront my demons, but revisit what had happened to us. And so I decided to go back. My family went with me. And after we came back from that trip, which was a remarkable trip, both joyous and very sad, and we went and went to Auschwitz and Auschwitz-Birkenau, and I said prayers over for my mother. When we came back, about a week after our return, Charlottesville happened. So everybody kind of knows what Charlottesville was. And at that point, I knew our story had to come out. Because the idea of hiding or not acknowledging what had happened to my family was no longer an option. The stories need to be told and reconfirmed. We lived on this farm about 60 kilometers east of Berlin for almost 2 years, living in a laundry shed and being hidden by these wonderful people. And only the mayor of the village knew who we were and that we were Jewish. But people kind of welcomed us. So that basically is my story and the story of my siblings. Both people in Germany and through the DP camps that we lived in for short periods of time. People were generous, people were warm, people were also horrible. You don't have one without the other. But then when we arrived in New York, people welcomed us with open arms. And that's kind of how we lived our lives until this. I always knew there was a lot of anti-Semitism, but not until this occurrence in 2017 in Charlottesville was I really hit by the incredible amount of anti-Semitism and hatred that continues to exist to this day. That has had a huge impact on our lives.
Great, thank you. You said that beautifully, Ginger. I do want you to just take a moment to talk a little bit about your siblings. You said your brother Alphonse, his death was one of the things that encouraged you to go to Germany. You were the youngest of 7. Just tell us a little bit about them, and how did you actually find them when you decided you were going to reconnect with your siblings?
Well, good question, Sheila. Actually, during our years here in America, they always knew where I was. We lived on the south side of Chicago. I had very sparse, intermittent contact with them. A birthday card or a New Year's card or a letter. So there was a tiny bit of a contact, but it wasn't that I erased them from my life. My brother was 18 when we came here. I was 6. So we've got one boy and 6 girls during those intervening ages. And we all lived sort of on the south side of Chicago. My sister Ruth, who was the third, there was Alphonse, and then my sister Santa, and then my sister Ruth. My sister Ruth decided that we needed to get out of Germany because life there was very, very difficult. And she took me with her, and we went to the American sector, and she was the one who started the process of our immigration, which was pretty remarkable. She was 15 at the time.
Right.
And for a 15-year-old to have the wherewithal to find the people who were going to be helpful was great. My sister Gertrude, who was the next one down, was kind of a surrogate mother to me. She was 12 when we came here, and she and I continued to be very, very close. And each sister has her own story. We all were together, sadly, and we did have a 50th reunion in 1996 of our arrival, which was fantastic. Unfortunately, my brother Alphonse, who was a physicist and lived in Washington, D.C., died in 2016. And then my sister Santa died in 2018. And another sister, Renee, died in the beginning of 2020. So from 7, we're now down to 4. One of my sisters, Judith, the next one up from me, lives in Texas with her family. But as Beth mentioned, and as you mentioned, from 7 kids, our family expanded to over 72 people who are thriving.
Right. All right. Let me turn to Beth now. So Beth, as you were growing up with your brother and sister, how much did you know as a youngster about your mother's history? Were you brought up in a Jewish environment with your mother and father and family? And did you try to, I'm giving a few questions here, did you try to incorporate some of your uncles and your aunts' stories into your documentary as well?
Yes, I was raised in a Jewish family. My mother was also. My mother, all of her siblings were sponsored by the Jewish Children's Bureau of Chicago. You had to have a sponsor to come to America. And the family that adopted my mother was a Jewish family. So she was raised in a Jewish household. Mom was confirmed at Sinai Temple on the south side of Chicago. And when she married my father, he also came from a Jewish family, a practicing Jewish family. So we were kids that my brother and sister and I, we all went to Hebrew school every Sunday. We all became bar and bat mitzvahs. We were all confirmed. And we were very involved in the Jewish community in Chicago. What were some of the other questions? Are the stories of my aunts and uncles included in the documentary? As much as they can be, absolutely. I think that, I wish that I had my uncle Alphonse in the film currently. However, right now he serves as the narrator, and we've used this 41-page document that he wrote for the family's 50th anniversary of their emigration to America. He wrote kind of a 41-page memoir for the family. It's not a published document. And that's what I used as my roadmap around Germany to decide where should I go? How will I unpack these clues? So his story is very much in the film. And my Aunt Ruth was a very willing interviewee, and she's a major character in the film, as is my Aunt Gertrude. I'm very lucky that we have some snippets of my Aunt Renee before she passed away. And my Aunt Judith has a more thematic presence in the film as opposed to an on-camera interview. So everybody is in there in specific ways. For example, my Aunt Senta, I didn't get to interview her before she passed away. However, there's a passage in a book that was published in Germany that includes a letter that she wrote, and that letter is in the book. And so that was one of my discoveries when I was filming in Berlin. It's like, oh my gosh, you guys have a book here and it has my Aunt Senta in it. I mean, it was just kind of mind-blowing. So they are all interwoven into the film, and obviously my mother, her point of view and is truly expressed through my point of view, and we get to see her delightful character on screen.
So do you still think there's more research you need to do? What else are you trying to find out? What do you still want to know?
I mean, it never ends. Oh my gosh, what are we looking at right now? Right now, we're specifically looking through some Hungarian archives, trying to find footage or stills. First of all, we're trying to find the synagogue where Mom's birth mother, Lena, her father was a cantor at a very Orthodox synagogue in Budapest. And we're trying to find that synagogue. Where was he? Which synagogue? And then if we can actually find some footage or some stills of, if not that synagogue, a synagogue that would be very similar to it, so that we can represent what that was like back in 1899 when Mom's birth mother was born. So the research never ends. I know that even when we release the film, I'll keep researching. It doesn't end. It's so fascinating.
Right. Okay, Beth, let me ask you this. Let's turn now to the two wonderful people who took you in. Give me their names, and why did they do it? Did they have other children of their own, and how did they treat you?
Well, I think that's a question for Mom, right?
Yes. Did I say Beth? I meant
yeah,
Ginger.
okay. Yeah.
Well, I'll start, and then Beth can fill in the blanks. Arthur Schmidt was a farmer who used a basement or a storage shed in the apartment building that we lived in to store his fruits and vegetables that he would then take to the Alexanderplatz, which was the area in which we lived, so that he could sell his fruits and vegetables on market day. And my father, Alexander, and this man, Arthur Schmidt, became friends. And after my mother was taken by the Gestapo and sent to Auschwitz, this man, Arthur Schmidt, said to my father, "You've got 7 children. I would be happy to, and you can't really take care of them. Why don't I take them out to the farm and the fruit orchard that I have, and they can live there with my wife and me?" He did. Arthur had a son from a first marriage, but the second marriage, he then remarried after his wife had died, and that was the woman, Paula, that I knew a little bit. And the question of why did they offer to take us to live on this farm? I don't know that we'll ever know the answer, except that these were 2 righteous Gentiles. They were good people who just felt that they needed to do something to help a friend and a friend's children, because we were scheduled to be on the next transport after my mother was was taken. And he didn't want that to happen. What motivates people is a question that has gone down through millennia. I don't have an answer except that they were good people who wanted to do the right thing.
So, Ginger, during the 2 years that you were there on the farm, hidden by this wonderful Schmidt family, were there any close calls? Were there any times you thought, oh, someone's coming to find us? The police are out. They're looking for us. They know something's afoot. Anything like that happen during your time there?
I mean, not that I remember because I was very young, but the answer is yes. Apparently, some people did come to that farm, and either one of my sisters did not let them in, or there was some small interaction, and somehow they successfully got rid of these people who came calling. I don't have any memory of that, but we were shielded by the mayor of the village. His name was Rudy Fairman, who managed to get extra ration cards for us so that we could eat. One of my sisters occasionally took a train back into Berlin. I don't know that there were any close calls from that kind of transport, but apparently there were people, a couple of men who I'll say came calling, came looking, and fortunately they were turned away. Now, you have to remember that had Arthur and Paula Schmidt been discovered as hiding Jews, they would have been murdered as well. There is no question of their survival had they been discovered as hiding us. So they put their own lives in terrible danger by shielding us.
Okay. So, Ginger, you talked about your mother who sadly was taken to Auschwitz and murdered. What happened to your dad?
My dad had originally been in a concentration camp in 1933 for about 10 months. Excuse me, as sort of a political dissident. And after he came out of that camp, and then he was released after 10 months, he was a pretty changed person, unable to find work until about the time that I was born, which was 1939, and began to do some electrical engineering. And he did survive. After we emigrated to the States, he was supposed to come 2 weeks later, but didn't come until 10 years, 1955, 1956. He remarried. There was a woman and her daughter who lived in the same apartment building who kind of took care of him, because not only was he bereft of his wife, my mother, but now he found that he was bereft of his 7 children. The reason that the 7 of us were able to get out of Germany was because we had to declare ourselves as orphans. Mm-hmm. So we had to deny that we had a living parent, but that enabled us to get out. He then remarried, had a stepdaughter, and then the 2 of them had a son. So I have a half brother, Harry, and a stepsister, Gitta. And when he finally was able to get out and bring his family with him to Chicago, he then got a job as an electrician at the University of Chicago, which, oddly enough, was the school that I attended for high school. So there were always these little tiny connections that existed through the years. And unfortunately, he died in 1970 from a heart condition, but he, had a decent life here and did have contact with the rest of my siblings.
Okay. So now, Beth, let's go to the question that you asked, the existential question, would you hide me? I know to you it's something that's critical, and you connect it to things that are going on in the world today. Your mother connected it to the Charlottesville and the rise of white supremacy in this country and anti-Semitism that we thought we didn't have as much here, but it is here, and it's here to this day. And we saw it on January 6th. So it's here. Talk about how that phrase, would you hide me? Who would have the courage to do what the Schmidts did for your mother in Germany? How important that is, how it resonates today.
Sure. I mean, the first question that popped into my mind when I met Arthur Schmidt III was, is courage and bravery something that you're born with, or can you learn it? And as I began to unpack that question, I was terribly concerned that it wasn't the right question. It was a curiosity, but of course it can be learned. Anyone can learn courage and bravery. And of course, people are born with natural instincts that they, someone's an excellent pianist, someone's great at horseback riding, whatever. But any talent that anybody wants to do, just look at Malcolm Gladwell, 10,000 hours and you can master it. So I believe the same thing is true about bravery and courage. But the question that I think going out to the farmland and actually seeing the farm where the Schmidts hid mom and her siblings, that's when I discovered that I had to ask that question, would you hide me? Because it forced me to be much more introspective and self-reflective, thinking, well, if I'm asking that question of you, would you hide me? Then I must ask the question in reverse, would I hide you? And it's easy for us to say, well, of course I would hide you. Some people answer that question immediately. Some people actually take the time to think about it. But when you really switch the point of view and ask yourself, would I hide you at the potential risk of my children, of my family, and so forth? The other thing about the Schmidts that I want to point out is they didn't just hide mom and her siblings, they also hid another mother and her child.
Wow.
So there were two families that they hid, which is extraordinary. But I think this might be, with your permission, a good time for me to share some of the slides and the video clips that we have prepared for you today, because I think it will answer some of these questions.
Great.
So let me know when you see what I'm seeing. Yes, there it is.
Right.
Yeah. So here is our film, Would You Hide Me? I have terrific editors on the project, wonderful marketing assistants, and we're in the uphill battle of post-production. And let's see here. So we have a couple of different things in addition to making the movie itself, which is a feature documentary. It'll be about 90 minutes long or so. We have a 60-second documentary series, and it looks something like this.
A rise of political extremism, white supremacy, domestic terrorism that we must confront and we will defeat.
This is the first inaugural address ever to mention the virus of white supremacy.
Rolling.
Bruce, interview take 2, marker.
The reason people don't want to acknowledge it because it's too horrific. They can't imagine people acting the way they do.
When did you know this is something that I have to do?
Charlottesville, when those folks came out of the fields carrying Nazi flags and chanting the same anti-Semitic bile that was chanted in the streets of Germany in the 30s. It was a wake-up call for us as a country.
The fact that he said white supremacy, And he talked about it as a scourge in this country. And to be the first president to do it, that's an important marker that years from now will be looked back on as an inflection point that an American president said white supremacy.
So as you can see, Charlottesville has affected all of us quite substantially. This is a photo, and it's interesting. At the beginning of our talk here today, you said that Mom has a vivid imagination, and we probably don't have pictures, but believe it or not, we have very few photographs. This is a photograph of the Weber siblings in front of a train in Munich on their way to the port of Bremerhaven to embark on the SS Marine Flasher, which brought them to America. And as Mom stated, this was the first ocean liner that brought child refugees under Truman's care.
Can you identify them for us?
Of course. Mom, do you want to identify everybody?
Sure. Starting on the left, my brother Alphonse, who was 18. Then my sister Zenta is next. And the tall one is my sister Ruth. Then Gertrude. Then the girl with the scarf over her head is my sister Renee. And then Judith is next to her. And I'm all the way down at the bottom with the little peak cap. So there we were, 6.5. And you can see that it's an Allied Forces train. And the ship that we came over on was commandeered by President Truman it was a troop ship.
Right.
So there were about 900 people who came over on that ship that were not just us, but it was adults and children.
Great.
And there were lots of different pictures of the family. Go ahead.
These are Mom's parents. This is her father, Alexander, in and around the time that he met Mom's mother, Lena. And this is the other end of the ship. This is when they arrived at New York Harbor. A lot of people think they arrived at Ellis Island. They actually arrived at New York Harbor. And it's, here they all are. And it's interesting, I'm looking at these armbands, which of course, in Germany, they were required to wear a Jewish star, but here they're wearing armbands that say USA.
Wow. What a fantastic photograph.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful.
So you were asking Mom earlier about how it felt once she got to America. And this is a little collage of Mom with my grandparents, Roz and Josh Spiegel, and her beginning a new life here in this country. Mom, do you want to talk about any of these photos?
Well, I'm just thinking about this. This is a new life. You can see that my name is Ginger.
Mm-hmm.
I was born Bela, B-E-L-A, which is actually a Hungarian man's name. I think my mother wanted a boy and it wound up with me, but Bela. So I had two languages, two identities, two sets of parents. Everything was kind of in twos, but you can see that little picture of three of us dancing. I always was a dancer from my earliest years. And these are reflective pictures of what growing up in America was like. And a very, very loving, caring parents and cousins who never treated me as anything but my adoptive parents' daughter. I was not seen as different, even though I struggled to have to learn English and get rid of my German accent, which was in Yiddish we say it was a Schande to have that German accent and be identified as German, because you just wanted to completely erase anything German or about the Holocaust.
Well, I think you were the magic age because my mother came over from Russia in 1923 at age 7, and she had no Yiddish or Russian accent. So I think you were the magic age, 6.5, 7. You were still able to take on the American language without the shred of the accent from the old country. Yeah.
That's right. It's interesting you say that because my sister Gertrude, who was 12 when she came, still has a slight accent.
Right.
And of course, the older ones are not. So it's my belief that if you're younger than 12, my sister Judith does not have an accent. Okay. Neither does Renee. So if you're younger than 12, you lose your accent.
Right.
So I want to take
I'm glad your mother too.
To this photograph here of Mom's birth father, Alexander. And one of the things that's important to understand about the family, Sheila, you had asked about what happened to your father. So we know that Lena was murdered at Auschwitz, and what happened to Alexander, who in many ways is really the unsung hero of this entire family's survival. He was a man who was incarcerated at Oranienburg, which was the very first concentration camp under the Third Reich in 1933. Oranienburg existed for about 1 year. And he left Oranienburg a broken man. Surely he must have been beaten quite badly when he was there. When he returned to the family, he had problems with his teeth, and he really couldn't function very well, as Mom mentioned, until about 1939, when he became an electrician, was employed as an electrician. This is an original source document that I found in the archives, or that was shared with me in the archives at Centrum Judaicum in Berlin. And you can really see the gaunt, kind of hollow eyes and experience of a man who has just been through the war. This photograph was taken when he went to the German government for reparations. And when Mom says that he was supposed to follow 2 weeks after they came over to America, yes, indeed, that was his intention and that was his hope. However, he couldn't find anyone to sponsor him. So he couldn't get out of Germany. And it took 10 years to finally figure out how to sponsor him and then his new wife and new children to come to America. And that was really thanks to my Aunt Gertrude and Uncle Sherwin, who were able to finally figure out the paperwork to get him over to come to America.
I have to interject here. Also, my sister Judith, who actually did live with my father once he came here, but she was very instrumental in bringing him over as well.
Yes, as a matter of fact, she was working at the University of Chicago Hospital, I think, as a phlebotomist, and she was able to help him secure employment at the University of Chicago. So this is my mommy, and
nice photo.
This picture.
God, look. When was I ever that young?
Well, so in many ways, so this is a picture of Mom right before she had her skiing accident. And I've included it here in this presentation just because it's kind of like, Charlottesville. You have these moments when it's before Charlottesville or it's after Charlottesville. Well, for Mom, of course, there's before the war and after the war, but she was born into war. So for Mom, and I think the experience of, and I really shouldn't speak for you, Mom, because you're here on this call, but at least from my point of view of where I was sitting as your daughter, there was before your accident and after your accident. And it wasn't until after Mom's accident that she made the very conscientious choice to reach out to her birth siblings.
Wow.
And by the way, that was brought about by the fact that the director of the Jewish Children's Bureau, who had become a friend of our family, asked me if I had contacted, this is almost 40 years later, asked me if I had contacted my birth family and told them about my accident. And I said no. And she chastised me and she said, "What are you waiting for?" And so that's when I thought about it, and I decided that I needed to contact them. And
Yeah.
my sister Gertrude always said, aha, after 40 years, you've finally come out of the desert.
Wow.
Just,
But I'm
just
looking at
like Moses.
I'm looking at the picture before where you're beautiful, and I'm looking at you now. You're a little older, but you still have the same sparkle. You still have that same joy, no matter what's happened to you. So that's a great blessing that you have. No
Well,
question.
I'll even go back to this slide here. I mean, here's
Very
mom.
kind of you.
Here's mom in the hospital. Okay, this is the most traumatic thing that has happened to her, to any of us, to witness my mother having to live like this with metal gear all over her body to keep her in place, to keep her alive, and she's smiling.
Right,
You
right.
know, this is my mother. She's the most resilient woman I've ever known, and
I was probably high, Beth.
well, probably.
Probably.
That's very true. She was on a lot of painkillers.
Yeah.
It took a couple of years of rehab for mom. And then what does she do? She goes back on the slopes because now she says, well, if I can't ski on skis, I'll ski on a sled. So
Actually, that happened 11 months after my accident.
crazy,
Wow.
crazy.
11 months. My mother thought I was nuts.
Mhm.
My father, Joshua, who was a neurosurgeon, said, well, she already broke her neck. There isn't much more she can do. So let her go and have a good time.
It is very safe skiing on a sled. You have at least one, if not two, extraordinary expert skiers behind, kind of in tandem or en belay or whatever you call it. That were
One of whom, the girl in the back, is my daughter Jennifer.
Yep, who's
Oh, I bet.
a fabulous skier even today.
So, Ginger, when was the last time you were on the snow like that?
Oh,
Probably, well, for a few years. I was injured in 84. I think I stopped skiing in about 88, 87 or 88, because one day I said, this is ridiculous. Look how I have to get dressed. And I hate the cold. So forget it, no more. I think I did ski for about 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
yep. I remember skiing with you on the sled, but mom took up wheelchair racing, so she became a racer, and then she really turned all of her focus and creativity to dance,
Wow.
which never left. That never left. These are actually the letters that were mailed to mom. You can see this, 1986. This is from her sister, Renee Dicker. This is the phone number that mom scratched on the envelope. There are some other numbers, Gertrude, Ruth, on the back of here. That these were the envelopes that mom found to then decide to make the phone calls. Like, let's call up her family. These photos were taken during the time they were in 3 different displaced persons camps, awaiting their passports for their exit visa. And this is a clip that I can share with you. And I know we're running out of time here, but so this will probably be the last clip I'll share with you right now, at their 40th anniversary reunion.
Well, das ist ein Weber Mischpocher hier.
My Uncle Alphonse and I became very, very close. We had a very special bond. He was a voice of reason for me, and he was very comforting and helpful. And we would talk about the war years, and he was the only one that would really open up to me about it.
We are the 7 children of Alexander and Lena Weber. Not only am I the eldest of the lot, but I am also the only boy among them. My sisters are Senta, Ruth, Gertrude, Renee, Judith, and Bela.
Sing. Sing. Oh, yes, sing. I verschwimmt ein Krokodil, wackel mit den Schwänzchen, was er will. Einmal geht er links rum, einmal geht er rechts. Tabana, tabana, tabana,
Can you imagine being the older brother and what he had to put up with us?
Hey, what about
6 girls? Gosh, he couldn't have been.
Alphonse started making trips to Voreen, which is the town where the farm was, where they were hidden by Paula and Arthur Schmidt. I had always wanted to go back to Berlin with my Uncle Alphonse. My kids are out of high school and I have time to travel, and I say, Alphonse, let's do the trip, let's go. And we make a plan and we have kind of a time frame set. But then Alphonse died. I was so disappointed. I wanted to see it through his eyes. I wanted to learn about it.
I think this is very important to us to remember. Papa, he cannot be here today, he'll be 85 years old now. It's too bad that our mother cannot be here. Had many, many good friends. And thus, I think we'll be older than 27 grandchildren.
Beautiful film, beautiful.
Thank
So
you.
we're going to start doing some of our summaries. Oh, is this the 7?
This is the 7th and the 40th. Yeah.
Beautiful. So now I want to start to close this wonderful program. It's so wonderful to have you here and to have you relive your memories for us and the important messages that you're bringing. So let me turn to you, Ginger, first. First of all, you must be very proud of your daughter for helping to collect these materials, putting them together in such a beautiful way, and creating a documentary that will mean a lot, not just to your family, but to history. So tell us, what do you want me and others to get from your story?
I think the most important thing to get, of course, is 2 things. One, the first is to never forget. The stories must continue to be told. And yes, I'm incredibly proud of Beth. Initially, I did not want our story to be shared, but I really bought into this documentary, and she is remarkable in doing it. And the other thing, the other big takeaway is that we can all be resilient. And as much evil as there is in the world, there is also much goodness. We have to sometimes search for it, but I'm very hopeful that we can continue to have friends, make friends, and be resilient, and find the goodness that does exist in life. And so those are my 2 main takeaways. I never want people to forget, but I also want people to realize that there is progress and much good that we can find in the world.
Wonderful.
And Sheila, I have to thank you for hosting this, for making this possible, so that we can try to reach out to as many people as we can. I think this is an important documentary. It's a very personal story, but it's one that needs to be told.
Okay, well, thank you. It was wonderful to have you, and wonderful to welcome you to my program. And now let me turn to Beth. So Beth, as much as your mother is very proud of you, you must be extremely proud of your beautiful, resilient, wonderful mother with that sparkle in her life, her personality, notwithstanding what she's been through. So what are the lessons that you've learned that you want us to remember when this documentary comes out?
Oh my gosh. I mean, there's no question that I'm proud of my mother. I always have been, I always will be. And she continues to be the rock of our family and always looks at the glass half full, always reminds me that anything that you believe you can do, you can achieve, regardless of the circumstances. Of course, I want people to remember, to never forget. I think that right now we're at I certainly never thought I would be making this documentary during this moment in history where we had vigilantes trying to have an attempted coup on our Capitol wearing anti-Semitic clothing. It is mind-boggling to me, and I'm gobsmacked by it. And it must be stopped in all uncertain terms. And so I feel that this film has become even larger than I expected it to be already, even before it's been released, because it is important to engage in the conversation of Holocaust awareness in any way that you can, whether it's through the arts, whether it's through dance, whether it's through writing or painting. So one of the things that I've been doing is I host on IGTV, on Instagram. I have a live television program every Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock Pacific Standard Time called Banter with Beth. And similar to what you're doing, Sheila, I have been inviting people to come on the show to talk about their point of view and their access in the conversation about Holocaust awareness. So we've had everyone from a neurosurgeon to a painter to journalists and all different kinds of people come on the show. And so we have the 60-second documentary series, which kind of matches the moment of the zeitgeist and current events. And then we have the Banter with Beth series that really allows us to engage and learn. I am learning so much from each of my guests, and that's really extraordinary. And then, of course, there's the film, and it's just an opportunity for people to share with their students, with their children. And I really believe that collectively we can teach empathy and we can teach compassion, and it's just a muscle that needs to be strengthened. So those are my final thoughts about that.
Well, thank you. Let me thank you both again for a wonderful presentation. We look forward to the documentary coming out. And I think there are no better two phrases to leave this whole program with than one, would you hide me? And two, would I hide you? Mm-hmm. And with that, we're going to sign off. We'll see you next time on Talkback. And again, Ginger and Beth, it's been wonderful having you on the program. Bye.
Thanks so much, Sheila.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Oh my God.
That was good.